Africa has created some of the best football players on the planet. N'Golo Kante, Paul Pogba, Karim Benzema, Chouameni.
What?
Oh, they're French? It's fine, I'll just edit this part out. In this video, I'll be discussing the past, the present, and the future of African football. We'll be looking at the investments being made in infrastructure and youth football, with specific examples from countries like Kenya, Morocco, and Nigeria. And I'll also be looking at some of the corruption that has slowed down the progression of football in Africa. But with Morocco's semi-final run in the World Cup in 2022 in Qatar, Africa without a question has a bright future ahead. Let's get into it. In case you guys are wondering what my personal background is, I'm originally from Yemen and Somalia. I grew up in Namibia and Sudan as well as a kid, so I have a deep love for the African continent. Now back to football. African football has a rich history dating back to the 20th century. In the early years, African teams were not given much attention on the international stage, and it wasn't until the 1960s that the first African team, Egypt, made an appearance in the World Cup. However, it wasn't until the 1990s that an African team began to make a name for themselves on the world stage, with Cameroon reaching the quarterfinal of the 1990 World Cup. Since then, African teams have continued to make progress, with Ghana coming close to reaching the semifinals in 2010. Despite the successes, African football has faced several challenges, including corruption, mismanagement, and lack of investment in infrastructure and development. There's no question that political security also contributed to players moving abroad to Europe to create a name for themselves. But before we move on to the 90s, we cannot neglect to mention George Weah. George Weah was the first non-European to win the Ballon d'Or. He's widely regarded as one of the best ever AC Milan and Monaco strikers. Now, looking at the present of football in Africa, African football is still facing several challenges, but there are also reasons to be optimistic. In recent years, there has been a greater investment in football infrastructure across the continent, with governments and private investors recognizing the economic and cultural value of the sport. There has also been a greater focus on youth development and coaching, with many African countries working to develop the next generation of football talent. Kenya and Nigeria are two examples of countries making significant investment in football infrastructure, youth development, and coaching. Looking ahead to the future, there are also reasons to be optimistic about the potential for African football to continue to grow and develop. The investment being made in football infrastructure and youth development and coaching is crucial for the continued success of growth of African football. However, there are still challenges to be addressed, such as corruption, mismanagement. Let's look at some specific examples of the investment being made in African football. In Kenya, the government has invested in the construction of new football stadiums, including the Kasarani Stadium, which has a capacity of 60,000 spectators. The Nyayo National Stadium in Nairobi underwent a major renovation in 2020, providing a state-of-the-art facility for football matches and events. Kenya has also made investments in youth development and coaching, with the establishment of the Kenyan Youth Sport Fund and Kenya Football Coaches Association. Nigeria is another example of an African country that is investing in football infrastructure and development. The government has invested in the construction of new football stadiums, including the Teslim Balogun Stadium in Lagos, which has a capacity of over 25,000 spectators. The National Stadium in Abuja has also been upgraded and modernized. Nigeria has also made significant investments in youth development and coaching, with the establishment of the Nigerian Football Federation, youth program, and the NFF Coaching Education Department. One of the most tragic incidents in the history of African football occurred in 2010 during the African Cup of Nations tournament in Angola. The Togo national team was on their way to participate in the tournament when their bus was under attack by separatist rebels. The attack resulted in the death of two members of the Togo's national team and the driver of the bus. The Togo team was understandably traumatized by the attack, but they made the courageous decision to stay and compete in the tournament despite their grief and the uncertainty of the situation. The team showed incredible resilience and determination in the face of tragedy. The incident drew attention to some of the challenges that African football faces, including the political instability and violence that could disrupt tournaments and events. it also highlighted the need for greater security measures and support for teams and players who are vulnerable to such attacks. Another significant moment in African football history occurred during the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. The tournament saw a strong performance from the Ghanaian team, who were the only African team remaining in the tournament after the group stages. Ghana faced Uruguay in the quarterfinals, and the match was tied at 1-1 after extra time. In the dying moments of the match, Ghana had a clear opportunity to score a winning goal, but Luis Suarez deliberately used his hand to block the ball from going into the net. The resulting penalty was missed by Asamoah Gyan, and the Uruguayan team went on to win the match in penalty shootouts. Despite the disappointment of the loss, the performance of the Ghanaian team was seen as a symbol of potential for African teams to compete at the highest level. It was a proud moment for the team and for African football as a whole, and it inspired hope for the future of the sport and of the continent. Another bright spot for Africa was Ivory Coast's golden generation. The Mimo Softcom Talent Factory has created some of the best talent in football, including the Touré brothers, Gervinho, Solomon Kalou, and others. The Talent Factory is a youth football academy. It was founded in 2013 by Jean-Marc Jouelou. It quickly gained a reputation for producing talented young footballers. It's known for its rigorous training program, which emphasizes technical skills, discipline, and physical fitness. It's undoubtedly a bright spot for the continent. Now switching gears to Morocco and their rise on the world stage. Morocco made significant investments in football academies in recent years as part of a broader effort to develop and promote football. The Mohammed VI Football Academy is one of the most prominent football academies in Morocco. It is located in the Sahel near Rabat and has state-of-the-art facilities for training and developing young footballers. The academy is named after King Mohammed VI, who is a passionate football fan and has been a driving force behind the development of football in Morocco. However, it's the refusal of the players not born in Morocco but are of Moroccan descent to play for their native Morocco that has made the biggest difference. Players like Ashraf Hakimi, that was born in Spain and brought up in the Real Madrid Youth Academy, but refusing to play for Spain over Morocco. Now imagine the likes of Zinedine Zidane playing for Algeria, or Lukaku playing for the Congo, or Paul Pogba playing for Guinea. African football would dominate. Just looking at the current champions of Europe, Real Madrid, they have Camavinga, who's of Angolan roots, Chouameni, who's of Cameroonian roots, Ferland Mendy, who's of Senegalese roots, and that's just to name a few. In conclusion, African football has come a long way since the early years, but there's still a lot of work to be done. The investment being made in football infrastructure, youth development, and coaching is a positive sign for the future of African football. Countries like Kenya, Nigeria, Morocco, Algeria, Ivory Coast are all leading the way, but more needs to be done to address the corruption and mismanagement. The biggest contributing factor to the rise of football in Africa is players like Riyad Mahrez playing for Algeria, Iñaki Williams playing for Ghana instead of Spain, Zaha playing for the Ivory Coast and not England. These factors have led to an improvement in the recruitment strategy for African teams, which has improved the overall standard. Now, if you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you gave it a like and subscribe to my channel. And thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it.